Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and we've got this week's version of the TCG Matchmaking Power Rankings for the One Piece card game. And this week is pretty significant since it is the first week with the new restrictions that we got announced for the One Piece card game 2. They do take effect officially on April 1st for competitive events, but they did decide to do it early just so we get a bit of a glimpse and some testing once that does become valid for this game as well. So we're going to go over the power rankings, the matchup chart, as well as the 10 deck lists for the 10 leaders with the highest win rate on the rank ladder as well. But a couple of things before we get started. First, if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We've been doing a lot of One Piece content, and we're going to continue that in the next couple of weeks as well, so you don't want to miss it. Also, thanks again to TCG Matchmaking, and follow them on their Patreon, which is linked in the description, as well as Sakura Kingdom, who does a lot of work for this as well. You can make sure to check out their channel as well. So lastly, I am just about to leave Japan for home, so no face cam this time. I just don't have the time to set it up again, and we're just gonna be in the no zone over here. Trust me, I'm here recording this for y'all. So let's jump on into it though with the power rankings, and we can start with the leaders. So again, if this is the first time you guys are seeing this, we do have the matches, wins, losses, and the win rate. The rating is kind of a function that's not only the win rate, it's also kind of in contention of how many matches are used and a couple other variables. So it's something that, if something had like a low amount of matches, but it had, a higher win rate, that would give it a little bit less points for the rating, just because it's something, there's more variance when that happens. And when you have a longer amount of matches and more of them, that does kind of change up what's happening. So first they have Zoro, second they have Shanks, then there's Bonnie, Marshall D. Teach, Purple Luffy, the green and red Smoker, then there is the Doflamingo, the Eustace Kid, the purple and red Luffy, as well as Lim here. So a good amount of variety still. Most of these decks are doing quite well. I do want to say that this is week one, and something that helps skew this data or bias it are a couple of things. One, these are decks that are mostly been established with this format already in mind. There's not a lot of new ones in contention because there's not a lot of new decks to bring to this. This is more so that older decks got more powerful that weren't around. We obviously don't see BY Luffy, and we don't see Rob Lucci or even Black Smoker on this top 10, which I'm not too surprised about for this one. And then also, pretty early, we do see Zoro and Shanks being pretty viable and have a pretty good high win rate. Also, Doflamingo still has a 54% win rate, though clearly a lot less games than what it used to be. It used to be like the most played leader on this rank ladder, and now it's just kind of sneaking in at 1,000 games right now. So I think that's something that's important. But what I'm trying to say is that the more kind of aggressive leading decks are usually the better decks on the first couple weeks, based on the fact that they're very aggressive, they're pretty optimized, and it's really hard to kind of be like more of the control matchup when you don't really know what the aggressive decks look like. So with that in mind, I do think that some decks can be a little bit more optimized with that, with this format, and get better with it. But I'm not very surprised to see Zoro super good out the gate when it lost its two kind of better matchups, or if not lost, they were reduced. And the fact that Doflamingo is really good for being kind of more aggressive to it, because it's able to kind of bounce back your aggressive tools while also being aggressive in its own case. And then Rob Lucci is probably the best removal deck against Zoro in general, especially with like 4-drop Lucci. And so with neither of those really present as much, I think it does mean that Zoro and other kind of aggressive decks can shine in this meta. So I think, again, it's the easy day one pick for this restriction list for Zoro, and I think it's something that's going to be probably pretty present in this format regardless, but it is also something that I think people can start leaning towards their deck building and trying to counter it once they now know that it's more established in this meta in general. So there we go. And looking at the matchup charts real quick, we do see some variety. I'm not going to go through every one of these squares, but I do want to say some real quick things. So first, we do see like Zoro here. It seems like it's pretty good matchup wise across the board. Only clearly negative one, I think, is the Bonnie. We do also see, like, of course, Rob Lucci as well as Doflamingo. These have been less good for us, but with only like a 50% win rate ish with Dofi, it's not even that bad. Yellow Kid is like a 50-50, and then Lim is about a 50-50 too. And Usopp, which I didn't even mention, Usopp did not make this week on the power rankings, which is a little bit surprising. I know some people are curious to see how that deck is doing. Currently, right now, you can see that the win rate for it is like under 50%, but it did make the matchup charts since it is one of the newer leaders that people are interested in. We do see Smoker also doing some pretty good stuff. And Shanks, with, it's always been kind of like the 50-50 master. And it's still pretty much carrying that title, right? All these matchups are quote unquote winnable, but not by a wide margin. We see that, like, Teach is about 50, Zoro is like a little bit unfavored, and then Red Purple Luffy is completely unfavored. We do see Red Purple Luffy where I was a little bit contentious about bringing this for this format because I felt like it was a pretty okay deck against what we've been seeing previously on their top spots, but like we do have like a minus matchup into the Blackbeard. The Smoker's about 50-50, and then we just have really bad matchups into Zoro and Bonnie, which these decks are going to be really present in my mind, and that's going to be tough to adapt to. So if we have a way to better those matchups, we can, but that generally seems to be a really tough spot. And you can even see on the right here that on this entire chart, I think it's the worst matchup in this entire chart. It is a like 20% win rate against Betty. With a 3-life leader, this matchup is abysmal, and I completely agree with this. So I'll be interested to see if Red Purple Luffy does anything either. We do also see Kid, where it's actually kind of 50-50. Only like really bad matchup is either Lim or the Bonnie. Mostly, I think like the fact that if you can play like 8-drop Kid, I think Yellow Kid ironically doesn't have a lot to do against it, so it can be sufficiently walled against it. And then we also do have the Doflamingo, which it still is present. I do think it's a deck that's still viable in its own way, and we'll talk about that when we go to the deck list. But only like real bad matchup is Usopp, which again I don't think is super present right now. Shanks is a little bit negative, and Bonnie's like a little bit negative, but by and large, I think this deck is still super viable. So if you like Dofi, you can still play it, but rest in peace, Jinbei, as well. So I don't think I have much more I want to go over in particular. These are just kind of the ratings, surface level based on some ranked games, but we don't get a lot of matchup chart data in general in this game, so I really do appreciate all they do for this one. So we're going to jump into the the highest win rate deck list for each one of these leaders, starting off with Zoro. And Zoro, it's a good deck right now. I don't know what to say. We've been seeing kind of some new innovations with the implementation of the OP10 chopper for the deck and making it more of the animal package. We've seen the animal package in a lot of other red decks, including like Shanks in the last format too, and potentially in this format as well if they want to. But this card is pretty broken. And when Rob Lucci could just pop it as soon as you played it, or like Doflamingo can bounce it back to their hand, which Doflamingo can still do that. This deck becomes a little bit worse, but most other decks kind of have to just, see that this card exists. We have a lot of good aggressive tools too. We got some new ones from the new starter deck as well, including the 5-drop Luffy, this being a 7K. And this can attack and then put the Dawn on your leader, which also then buffs Luffy again to a 7K and makes your own leader a 6K. So that's really, really strong, specifically against like 6K leaders, which would be a little bit tougher to get around with like on curve. If you played it on 5, you usually are playing a 5-drop and passing, but this can like pressure them with a 7K attack with this Luffy and then a 6K attack with the leader, which is really good. We also do have the new Sanji 2K from Starter Deck 21. This is just a really strong 2K that's just generically good. It's just Janbei on board, but being able to just choose one of your Straw Hat type characters and then give that boost is really good. So it can't be the leader, but the fact that it's generally as good is really strong as well. We are still playing a copy of Janbei too, if you so desire, and then also the Mole Pistol. So this is a really strong card, I think, in this format. The fact that you're able to, it's kind of like Jet Pistol but better, and it's more. The fact that you're in range to get rid of like a 7K inherently is good, but there's some like really good 2-for-1 potentials you can do as well. So, for example, if you're playing against a deck that has like Rebecca, you can get rid of the Rebecca and give something minus 5K. Against Eustace Kid, if they have Eustace Kid and the Rosinante, you can give the Eustace Kid the minus 5K, and then you can get rid of the Rosinante with the 2K power less. So there's a lot of situations that this card can help you get out of. And it's just really good. The trigger effect comes up very often too. This deck a little bit less often because it's a little bit trickier to have a 6K on the board on your opponent's turn. But if it works out, it really works out. So I don't have really much more to say, but I think Zoro is going to be really present. And if not, I think like de facto like one of the better decks in this format right now. But since it is kind of a low to the ground aggressive deck, I do think it's something that people can start targeting and try to have a better matchup as well. But here it is. Next up, you've got Shanks, and Shanks is. I think there's a lot of ways to build this leader in general. I think the card pool for red is really large right now and very wide, and I don't think this is the only way to build it. This one is more of like a straw hat variant, even though we don't have like the Nami Searcher in the deck or not. But just really, the red cards we got in the set are just really good. So the 3-drop Sanji, really good for being able to pressure your opponent, but also we didn't always have things to do on like 3 or 4 Dawn consistently, so the Sanji being able to do that is great, as well as the Tony Chopper being a 2K that's also a blocker is amazing. Then also the Lucky Roo, which with less copies of the Doflamingo running around, I think this is great, especially against Zoro. This can block an attack and get rid of a Chopper, which is a really good 2-for-1. So I think this is a really strong card in this format when it wasn't really present in the previous one, which I thought was interesting. And then we do have like the Yasop, we do have the Rush Luffy, and then we also have the Beckman and the kind of rest of the top end for this deck too. So also we've got the Divine Departure. This card is really good. I really like the design for it, being able to be removal if we need it to be, but also being able to be like a 3K counter on leader is great. The alt art for this card is amazing too. I've been seeing them all over Japan, and I'm not usually a full art guy, but I'm like, man, I hope I get 1 or 2 copies because they just look really, really nice. So other than that, I think Shanks is going to be around. It's still just a presence in this game right now with kind of, it's never the worst pick. It has a lot of just neutral matchups, which is good for it. And, also a fan favorite character for a lot of people. So again, this is not the only way to build it, but I do like what this build is doing. And curious to see what kind of builds for Shanks develop in the next couple weeks as well. Next up, we've got Bonnie, and I think Bonnie is like one of the bigger winners from this restriction list. This is the leader that's been around as long as Rob Lucci, but clearly Rob Lucci, I think, has been doing better consistently with it. The fact that like we don't have to worry about Ice Age removing our bigger bodies is a huge boon for this deck right now. Something that was usually kind of a matchup changer and just felt really bad. You're like, oh, I'm going to spend my entire turn playing like a 9-cost Shanks to get rid of your dude. And then they're like, all right, cool. Well, I'll do the same thing with Echo Moria and in Ice Age. And then you just are way behind in a lot of ways. So with that, I do think you have some aggressive tools to end late games. But we also have cards like Carrot as well as the Cavendish and the Smoker to help us on our 5 Dawn plays. Smoker being a really great card for this deck, and the fact that it does let us end the turn with a Dawn open every time by just untapping the Dawn and then just keeping it open there. Also being a 5/7 banish is great too, so I really like what this card does for us. We have the Tashigi, which is just a good 2K, but also another way for us to help defend our 8-drop kid in certain matchups. And generally speaking, most people are just playing like the Supernova package and then just having the top end of Dofi. So normally not like the 50-50 with Baby 5 that we've seen in the past sometimes, just kind of the straight Supernova build, which I think is the better way. I do agree with that one. So this is the build here for Bonnie, and I think that this deck can show a lot of development in the next couple weeks, and definitely one of the better decks in this format right now. And we've got Teach, and this one, Teach, he's still like in a really interesting position for us. So in OP10, this was kind of like the boogeyman as we were getting into the format, and it was something where a lot of people were afraid it was going to be tier 0, and then it was just like tier 1.5 at best, I think was fair in OP09 for us in the English version. And then, oh, well, this deck was really strong. We get some new support. The new Kuzan card is really, really strong for this deck. Being able to kind of option select into whatever card you need for a situation, usually Burgess, but being able to be more consistent with it is great. And this also, you can convert this into, we put this in 5. We can put some Dawn onto it to pressure something and then use this Activate main to go into the card we need in active, which is really good too. So Kuzan's definitely going to make the deck, I think, a lot more viable. And also the fact that Doflamingo is going to be likely less popular, which is one of the worst matchups for Teach. And even if it is more popular, than I'm thinking, Jinbei was a really good card for helping us make wide boards, which is going to be a little bit easier for Teach to handle. But if we look at the power rankings too, we do see that it did have like a 50% win rate over 6,000 games, and it was the second most played leader on this last week too. But I think it is something that this deck is also just very complex in the sense that you kind of have to hard commit to what this deck looks like and what it does. So because of that, since it was the most played leader, I think the win rate is probably a little bit lower than what reality would be for more of a tournament setting. So I do want to make that clear. And then last thing I'll say is that the deck space for Teach is at an all-time low, right? We're already kind of had like, 6 tech spots or so. But now that we have the additional copies of like Kuzan to add 4 copies to us, like we have like no room. Like most of the decks that I've been seeing are like almost identical to this. I do think there's room for innovation and for people to try out some new things. But generally speaking, this is a great, like, it's going to look like this 9 times out of 10, right? We also do have like the new Shiru, which this deck is playing 1 copy of it. But opponent's turn, this character gets plus 2k power and then activate main once per turn. If your leader has Blackbeard Pirates type and this character is played on this turn, you can KO one of your opponent's characters' base cost of 3 or less. So that's fine, right? Like this sometimes shows up for some of these effects, right? Being able to just play it on 4 and get rid of a 3k is fine. But generally speaking, like Doc Q as well as like Von Augur are just kind of better in those spots. Kuzan being able to slot into Von Augur if you need to is really, really nice too, while having that protection. So if you need to use like Finger Pistol to get rid of an 8 cost, you can use Kuzan to pop into Augur and then use the Finger Pistol at the same time. So I think this deck is still really good. I'll probably need to do like a whole stream committed to playing this because I am really interested to seeing what the actual play style for is it, and it's still a really good spot. So here's Teach. You guys probably have opinions on it already, but here it is. And the last thing I was going to say is that I don't think this is tier 0 in this format right now. I think it's very good. I think it's going to be very present as well. It was like in the beginning of OP10, and I do think like the Zoro matchup could be something that deters Teach a little bit, but this is something that I do think Teach is going to be very present in its own way. So there we go. All right, next up you got Purple Luffy, and this deck was really pretty solid in OP09 for us here in the English version. I would say it was like probably the bottom 5 or like the maybe bottom 10 leaders that we had for that format. It was really aggressive. It did have a bit of a bad Doflamingo matchup, and then like Ice Age let your opponent, if you're playing as Rob Lucci, get rid of your Luffy Taro for kind of free. But it wasn't a bad deck, and I think it got a lot of tops, and even won one of the One Piece Day regionals in Dallas as well. But this deck, I do think, is in a better spot a little bit in this format. Zoro is definitely a really bad matchup for us because they are very aggressive. It means that we don't really have time to use our leader effect at the same time. But I think we're in a spot where Luffy can be kind of a really strong force in this meta in general. So some interesting things I noticed for this build too. Basically, it's just the Magellan ad. So, the on play, you lose a Dawn and your opponent loses a Dawn. This can be really good against decks like Blackbeard or other decks that try to get into the late game if they're not careful about it. Also, the fact that it has like the protection, quote unquote, from your opponent KOing it is really strong. Some decks just like don't have any removal besides actually KOing a card, so this Magellan can be really strong in that sense. I do think like Zoro would love to see this card in your hand more often, so it's something you have to be a little bit more cognizant about. We do still have like the 7-drop Luffy Tara. We do have like the Sanji and the rest of the package here as well. But I do think this deck is still really strong in this format. It's something that's pretty understood. There's no real changes from OP10 from the purple side of the card pool. So if you still like Purple Luffy, you can still sleeve it up. I think you'll find some success. And I don't really have much more to say, so there it is. Next up, we've got Smoker, and Smoker definitely is a deck that's going to have a lot of different builds as we go into the next couple weeks, and it's something that I think can consistently top with 2 pretty distinct-looking builds as well. And this one is kind of like a weird kind of mid-range from what I've been seeing for it as well. So this is more of a Straw Hat version of the deck. We're not playing the 7-drop Luffy blocker, which I'm a big fan of that card in general, but we are doing some things like playing the 5-drop Luffy, which this card can you play it on 5, you attack, you put a Dawn on itself, it's a 7k, and then your Smoker can see that's a 7k, you get 2 extra Dawn, and you can go 7. So like from an empty board, going 2 7k attacks from leader as well as this Luffy is pretty strong, and a lot of decks kind of have to really respect that pressure. We're also playing Carrot, which I think is a really interesting ad for this, but helps us for some kind of more mid-range decks, and then we are playing like the Smoker, we are playing like the Hody Jones, we are playing a good amount of these events as well. So 0-cost event, we also have Radical Beam, the 10-layer Igloo, as well as the Mulgun. I am surprised that it's not like the Kick Course, since that is a Straw Hat and Nami can find it, but I think that's fine for us. We're also not playing 8-drop Kid, which I'm a little bit surprised about for this build, since it is, Smoker is probably one of the better decks to play defend 8-drop Kid, since we have like the in-archetype Toshigi, and we also have the fact that we can use on 8 Dawn, we can play it. We can use the Smoker Leader effect to untap 2 Dawn and then put one underneath the Eustace Kid, since it is, inherently an 8K. So I do think like you can play versions of that one. This deck is really open to different varieties for it, and it's definitely one of my favorite decks in this format right now. So if you ever have like a build like you're really confident in, I think it can definitely work out. I've been playing also like a Straw Hat Animal version as well too, which is like hyper aggressive and can get there in a lot of ways. But this is definitely more of kind of like a mid-range. Like I can adapt to my opponent's playstyle. I can be the aggressor, or I can be the more control deck, and I think that can be very strong as well. So this is a Smoker, and I'm curious to see all the builds that pop up in the next couple weeks. So we got a couple more lists, and we're going to go to Doflamingo, which this deck I promise you is still viable based on my own observations. And I do think that if you are expecting this deck to just not be around anymore, that is a bit of a mistake. We do lose Jinbei and we do miss Jinbei. I think it's a very strong card that Doflamingo will definitely feel the consequences of that. But this is really kind of an interesting build from this one specifically. This is different than what I've been seeing from a lot of other players with the restrictions in mind. Specifically, it's just kind of like the quote unquote top end for this one, right? 4 copies of Jozu, which is the maximum amount that you can run, which is interesting. 4 copies of the Red Rock, and then 2 copies of the Raging Tiger. So, generically speaking, this is kind of looking more like what I respect more from like or expect more from a Boa deck, where we get this early advantage by playing a couple bodies on boards, and then if our opponent can't answer them, then every turn we're just like red rocking, we're moving whatever they're playing, and they're just getting like a lot of incremental damage from like the cards that we already have established. So I think that can be really strong from Doflamingo from this play style for it. Obviously we get the quote unquote card draw from being able to play off the top of our deck, are also by using Teach or Perona or something like that to help set it up. So I do think the deck is still present, and again, if you aren't expecting this deck, that is probably incorrect from what we're seeing. I don't know if playing this many events is the right call, personally, from my own testing, but this did get a lot of the highest win rate on the ladder right now. So they're not wrong, right? They're not in a bad spot, and you do need to make sure that you can get rid of stuff like 8-drop Kid very consistently, and I think that helps even out some matches. Even like against Teach, like if they get to 10 Dawn, being able to red rock their 10 drop is really good too. So we'll see how this deck works, and we'll go from there. Next up, we've got Eustace Kid. So this is one of our newer leaders that came out in OP10. And this deck is like kind of in an okay spot to be of a aggressor, right? With all the burn damage that it has, and also the fact that again we aren't going to get aggressed as hard from something like Doflamingo. I think if I remember right, the matchup for Zoro, was only like 50-50. Oh, because we were able to establish a lot of blockers. Yeah, that makes sense. With our leader effect, we can do that, and we can use it on like the Basil Hawkins. Like this card's almost always going to deal damage to our opponent if we're playing against like red, because just how the removal works. And we can also just always force a block, which is really, really good. We also have like some potential for more burn damage off the Nico Robin, which is pretty aggressive for us. And then our top end is like the 7-drop Law, which being able to use this to get a heal is really good. The 8-drop Kid being able to do some burn damage and also just be like a really good blocker that also draws 1 trash ones. And then like the Ace being able to be like a really kind of rush-centric card. So I do think this deck is better than where it was in the previous restriction list, because we can be more aggressive and we can kind of feel like our big drops are going to be on board a little bit more often, are going to at least require a lot more resources from our opponent as well. And the only thing I think is that like this deck does lose pretty hard to 8-drop Kid if you're not kind of set up to answer it, just because of like it's an 8-drop 8K, and we can't really interact with those anymore unless we're playing like Charlotte Katakuri, which we could be, but kind of goes against what this deck's kind of doing. So we'll see if I could see like if you really want to beat 8-drop Kid, we could play like a copy or 2 of that in the deck. I don't think it's great right now, but it is an option for you. And in general, I think this deck is still pretty fun, and I need to do some more testing with it as well. Next up, we've got the red and purple Luffy, and I kind of said this during the matchup chart part, where I don't really know how I feel about this deck in a tournament setting, because you do have a lot of kind of tougher matchups with more of the more present decks that exist right now. I do think that it makes more sense to play more of like the the Zoro Juro version of this build, because the amount of early interaction with this card is a little bit lower than where we were previously. So you can more consistently, I think, get the attack and draw not to draw the ramp from this card, which is really, really good. I'm not like a really big fan on like the Eustace Captain Kidd or the Newgate specifically. Like I usually choose one or the other, and we're also playing the Yasop. So this is a lot of ways to make our leader a 7K or 8K leader, which is strong. And I do think that something like Zoro that can be impactful. Zoro is really good at making like a lot of like 5K and 6K attacks, but not great that much outside of that, right? You once they have to like start, putting a lot of individual dawn on their leader or on their characters, it's a little bit tougher for them to kind of pressure as efficiently as something like Dofi. Dofi was way better at making like 6 and 7K attacks than Zoro, but at like a little bit less copies of attacks for it. So that's something that I think Luffy's going to have a hard time with specifically, is just how present those decks are going to be. So we do also have like some ways to interact with like Blackbeard and Bonnie by having like these big bodies that can attack immediately. We also have like Tenkosh Shanks can be maybe a little bit less of a trap in this format too, though I'd have to do some more testing for it. And yeah, in general, I do like this leader. I want to do some more testing with it, and be curious to see how it really does in these next couple weeks of OP10. And then wrap it up, we do have our last leader, which is Lim, which I've been doing a lot of testing with. My build's been pretty different, and I did make like a big video the other day going over my builds for from OP10 on day one. Lim was probably the one that I think a lot of people had a lot of issues with. I pretty much made like a build that was like a hyper Zoro ramp deck of it. So you just try to get to Zoro, not only find it consistently, but get to 9 Dawn as possible, and just try to play it as soon as possible. But I do think there are some ways to have some alternative top end and play even a little bit like slower. We do have audio, which I do think this card is a little bit better in the context that it doesn't get removed as easy, especially against something like Rob Lucci, which is really strong. The Doflamingo still is good, being able to just like buy us another turn sometimes. And then you do also just have like a suite of new cards from OP10, like the Newgate, the Enel, the Mihawk, as well as the 1-drop Lim, which this card is so important for the deck. And I think this is kind of the issue with this. This deck is this card is unsearchable because it is named Lim, and the other searcher for the deck is for Lim cards. And you kind of need to see this turn 1. And if you don't, you feel like you're really, really behind in a lot of ways. So I do think that Lim is way better in this format than where it was at the beginning of OP10, at least the OP10 Japanese meta. I do think this is a deck that does have some strength and can show up, and I'd be interested to see how it does in the next couple weeks too. But I've been having a lot of fun with it. I might try to do like a committed like live stream to it too in the next week. But happy to see it in the top 10 for this one as well. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you want any of these deck lists, they can be found on my website, Eggman Events, in the TCG Power Rankings section for a section for it. So don't have much more to say. I'm going to get on up playing a little bit. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll catch you all next time.
Damn it. Damn it.